Good afternoon and welcome to the Oxford Biodynamics PLC half-year results webinar hosted by Yellowstone Advisory. We're delighted to have with us today Jon Burrows, the CEO, Matthew Wakefield, the Chairman, Paul Stockdale, the CFO, and Sasha Akulichev, the Chief Scientific Officer. I'm really pleased to hand over to Matthew Wakefield, the Chairman of Oxford Biodynamics, to start today's presentation.
Thank you, Alex, and welcome everyone this afternoon. We, as a company, as a board, realise how important the next 3 to 4 months are for the company, and that's why we've got the entire executive team with us today. We'd like to iron out quite a few misconceptions that might be in the market, and it gives everyone an opportunity to ask questions of Sasha, co-founder and Chief Scientific Officer of the company, and also Paul, the CFO. Jon will be doing the majority of the presentation, and we realise that on everyone's mind is the commercialisation of the science, which has been proven many times. So I'm going to hand over to Jon immediately now to talk through what steps we've made on that commercialisation process, and I'll pass over to you, Jon.
Thank you, Matthew. Thank you to everybody who signed up. I believe we have about 90 people signed up, and it's a pleasure to talk to you today about some of the wonderful things that we've actually been doing and the future that we see for the company. I want to just start by getting a little bit real here. You know, we've been running the company for 4 years as a team, and I know I spend most of my living time, whether awake, asleep, thinking, dreaming, worrying, on behalf of OBD. And I think the team we've built does a lot of that too. And, you know, this weekend I went to recharge and visit my mother, and I had time to reflect. And what I reflected on was, why do I still have the same passion, drive, and belief in what I do these days with OBD that I've had for the last 45 years? And I thought about that and I said, wow, 45 years, you're 62. And my first thought about what I do, and I didn't realize it until later, was when my stepfather died of pancreatic cancer when I was 17 years old. And that's really shaped the way I think about what I do, how science works, how cancer and other diseases need to be battled. And OBD, as you can see on this slide, has the tech to do that. And as you'll see as we go further through this, it actually is head and shoulders, as I show you these performance comparison tests, above anything else that's out there in all the things we do. And this is why I firmly believe that we are going to, even though we're in early growth phase, really make a difference. You know, I spent 5 years watching my friend Tom die from lung cancer, trying to keep himself alive to see his kids graduate before succumbing to the disease. I know all of us have been touched by this awful disease type, even had it and responded thankfully to a drug or lost a loved one. Recently, I had to sit on the sidelines and watch 6-year-old Rakan die from kidney cancer. There was nothing anybody could do. What we do, what you support, what I still have the passion, drive, and belief for, can make a massive difference. And we're a long way along the lines to making it happen and making that a reality in the market. So it is my pleasure to talk to you all about this. And I'll go through the disclaimer. You've seen the pipeline. We have products on the market, both being sold, the CERT and the PSE, and a development pipeline that, I'm sorry, but don't seem to be able to see my, oh, here it is, my cursor. And a development pipeline, which I see as products or assets, because they can be, and we're in good discussions with people, partnered and commercialized as a collaboration and lead to non-dilutive deals. Actually, even these tests on the market are not above being partnered with bigger companies that have the infrastructure to push us forward. I hope that you will see what we've built on this product pipeline is a mini Foundation Medicine, a mini Roche Diagnostics, a mini Guardant. And that's what we've done on purpose, so that the appetite for those big guys, when they take a look at this new technology and what it can be done is, wow, they look just like us and they do what we can't do. We need to work with them. So let me tell you about the progress we've made since January 2024, when we last talked on a webinar, and a lot of it in the last 10 weeks since the raise that you all supported, and thank you for that. We've been laying a solid foundation for our prostate PSE test with growth in Q1 and Q2 I'll tell you about, that we can capitalize on in the second half of the year. Our top-down search strategy with the CMOs, the key opinion leaders that we've been talking to, have advised us that the fastest route to market for regional and national adoption of CERT is to actually put together a prescribed observational registry study, which we have in place, and I'll tell you more about how that is moving forward and looking very good for us. As I mentioned a second ago, there are pipeline partnering discussions with the canine asset and the colorectal asset that we've been in for several months now, with multiple partners possible. And I'm very bullish that something will materialize this year. And what was really an accolade for us on this fourth bullet point is finally CERT was recognized by the UK government in its call for a cancer immunotherapy response solution in the CERP award and grant. And we've been shortlisted for that in a shortlist of 2, and Dr. Akulechev, Sasha, will talk about that a little bit later. So let's get right on to a performance comparison table for PSE. And what I want to show you here is that if you look at PSE in this column, what you see is all these metrics, we're at the top of the range. And all these other 10 tests, many of which you've heard about and even asked us about, really, do not pass muster in terms of accuracy. You can see they're all very, very low. In terms of positive predictive value, which is actually the number that drives the number of false positives, which means for PSA here, if it's 25% and 3/4 of the time, you're sending someone forward with a test that shouldn't be sent forward. And even the specificity, which is the ability to actually have a positive value and identify a disease, is very, very low. This means then that there's more testing and unnecessary interventions happening, more MRIs and biopsies that aren't needed, associated with their complications and the stresses and anxieties of a potential cancer diagnosis. What it's all about is accurately detecting cancer, sparing men from destructive biopsies, and our test is superior to every one of those. So how is it now going commercially? If you look on the right-hand side of this graph, since we launched, we've been on a growth trajectory. What does that mean? That means we've run 454 tests to date. In Q1, Steve Arrivo had managed to get 15 concierge clinics ordering. We now have over 30 ordering in Q2. We have 7 signed up to multi-use contracts. I'm going to explain a little bit about what that's all about. So this is not a linear commercialization. It doesn't happen overnight. This isn't a widget. what happens here is that the concierge doctors have to understand what's on this comparison table. And a lot of the time when they see it, they basically say, because they're using one or more of these tests, oh, wow, we are using the wrong test. And that starts the conversation of how do we get that into our clinic and our group of clinics. That's when they start using the test. And as all doctors do, they are going to try it and see if it's any good and how it fits with the way they treat their patients and if it really does help, no matter what we say about its superiority. And I'm going to tell you about Dr. Polman in a minute and how he has championed that for us. In Q2, we've got 30 ordering so far. Now, what are these 7 signed up multi-use contracts? What they are groups of concierge that have signed up and they want a definitive price. In the US, obviously $950 is what this is selling for, so that they can go ahead, sell this in multiples, be billed for it in a month or 3 months, depending on the deal, and start to grow the number of tests that they're using per day, per week, per month. As you can see on this, we've got just over 3 per day coming in right now with our users. What we see with an example like Forum Health, which has 40 clinics, and we're introduced through Doctor Studio with 3 clinics where they're using the test. They looked at the test and went, wow, we need that in all 40 of our clinics. That doesn't happen overnight. What we have to do is start converting these to multiple use in multiple clinics of theirs. But this is how, when you see 40 clinics capable of moving from the 1 to 3, there's a 10-fold increase. Going from 3 a day to 5 a day to 10 a day, a lot of these clinics have 50 to 100 men. That means if you have 30 clinics, you've got thousands of men that are needed here, and they need the test. And this test can be used to get a baseline, especially if the men over the age of 45 and in that 50 ring. That's where we're pushing. Also, you can see that we're not just going to sit with 30. We're going to keep pushing that. What we've done with the team, we've brought our VP of Diagnostics, who's been with us now for several years, Joe Abdo, into the mix to start going into these clinics virtually and in person and making sure they're onboarded. What you might not understand, and why would you, is that us not getting a foothold in a clinic can be as simple as the test kits that are sent are mislaid. They never get through the office manager, they get put in the wrong place. Making sure these people are up and running, they can sign the requisition forms, that it becomes routine, and that routine gets duplicated across the doctors and the other clinics is how we grow this. And that's what we're in process of doing. Also, we're looking for distribution, because being able to get the blood drawn, if it's not in the clinic, not all of them do it. You need somewhere for a patient to take a requisition, get their blood drawn, and you need them either regionally, as we have with any test now, who are looking to partner with us to do blood draws regionally in the south of the US. They have over 230 US locations. And national distribution partners who have the infrastructure nationally to do blood testing. These are the people we talked about in the last webinar who have embedded their phlebotomy in the clinics and hospitals of large health systems around the country. Now, recently, because we've been out there telling people about what we do on this performance chart, we actually had one of the large distributors come talk to us and basically say, look, we have been selling actually 2 of the tests that are on your chart. And what we realize now is the basis of all our customer complaints, that they're not good tests and they don't really help us, has made us look at what is that 94% accurate test? Is it actually any good? Is it what we should be using? And when they looked at that, and basically said, we need to sit down and talk about how we can work together for us to offer your test and start distributing it. This is another facet of how we can grow the numbers in the second half of this year and into 25 to actually start capturing significant revenue with this test for the company. But there's a little bit more to this too. And Dr. Garrett Pullman is a national key opinion leader. He's the host of the Prostate Health Podcast, which is where you won't have heard of it because the urologists in the US and actually around the world go here virtually to learn about what's new in the world of urology. It's one of the ways they keep up before they do their continuing medical education once a year. What Dr. Pullman has done with us is he started using our test, building collateral, and evangelizing as a champion at the large associations, the large Urology Group Practice Association, the American Urology Association, and with any doctor that Steve Arrivo wants to put him in contact with about how this has changed the way he treats patients and how it can change the way they treat patients. He has also gone ahead and put an application in to the American Urology Association's continuing medical education so that next April, during their national meeting, he can run a national education panel on how PSE helps urologists treat their patients. And I'll go into a little bit more detail, but I don't want to forget all of the good RNS work that we've done in the last couple of months, bringing the UK clinical lab online, signing up the London Clinic and their rapid diagnostic center, getting Goodbody engaged as distributor in the US for men that can't get the test through their GP or don't have access to a private doctor, and even having a Turkish distributor signed up going after the high net worths in Ankara and Istanbul. Suffice it to say, though, our big market is the US. And let's talk about Dr. Pullman. He has found, after using this test 40 or more times, that this has really allowed him to better serve his patients. His experience that he is passing on through his podcast and to his colleagues nationally and locally is there are very clear results. This binary outcome is easy to explain to patients and their families. The patient experience with an easy blood draw that can be done in the same visit as even a digital rectal exam ahead of MRI or biopsy really helps. The results are delivered in about 4 days after the blood sample is received. And he is so proactive that within a week or 10 days of actually treating somebody and doing the testing, he puts his case studies together with us. You can see here in case study number 1, in the early days of this, which is really several weeks ago now, his comment is that looking back, he could have saved this man from an expensive biopsy and MRI by fully committing to the EpiSwitch PSE result, which actually showed that there was no cancer detected, but he didn't have the experience of the test. In case number 2, he has a patient who has a cardiac pacemaker, cannot have an MRI, who he would usually have sent forward for a biopsy because PSA wouldn't have given him the right information. By using PSE, he was actually able to confirm that early stage cancer was likely. They were sent forward for a biopsy. It was found to be a Gleason 3.4. The patient was put on active surveillance and will be getting more PSEs down the road to make sure that nothing has continued to a more aggressive stage. And to date, out of the 25 to 28 patients he looked at, he found 14 of them, and that's only case studies he's written up so far out of the 40, that he was able to not send forward for a biopsy based on the PSE result. That represents a 50% biopsy avoidance rate. And that, as we were saying earlier, is one of the most important things, is avoiding sending those men forward for a destructive biopsy that really don't need one. That's the value that we're bringing with the test and is being recognized as we move forward. So to just summarize and push the point forward, there are two valuable uses for PSE that he is championing. It's a screening and baseline cancer detection test for any man over the age of 45. And when it's time for a urologist to decide if an MRI or perhaps a biopsy is truly needed, using the PSE prior is very cost-effective and very beneficial. So I'll leave you with that with Dr. Pohlmann and move on to the checkpoint inhibitor response test. I think everybody that's been following and investing in us knows that this was the test that can predict response to immune checkpoint inhibitors prior to therapy and indeed during therapy. Finding those responders and non-responders is very important. It's high accuracy, sensitivity, and specificity. And the commercial update is this. If you look at the chart on the right, what we've been able to do in this quarter is push our number of tests up by using and executing the top-down sales approach. And I'll explain this to you, but I believe this is the first time we've had the confidence, because of this mechanism of using a prospective observational registry study that is run through a National Investigational Review Board protocol, that we can actually project off the numbers that we've seen as the first one region came on board at the beginning of June, that it's pushing our run rate up between 3 and 5 a day. Actually, we were over 4, so that we're going to see this growth by the end of this quarter. We expect that we should be able to see the growth continue through the next many quarters. We've got 1 regional onboarded, 3 more onboarding in Q3. And in fact, out of all of them, we had 7 that we'd looked at. We have more that are actually asking to get involved in this. Dr. Mathis has done a fantastic job getting this up and running in just a few months with the chief medical officers and key opinion leaders. Is a massive feat for him. The top-down pressure of this with the protocol that's driven into the doctors in those regional clinics can help us in 2 ways. First of all, we generate revenue from those tests through the insurers, as we always did with our CPT code. We're able to capture very quickly real-world data for health economics and getting into the NCCN guidelines. And because we expect there to be a lot of growth with this as we bring on these other regional centers, we've actually also put in place an online customer relationship management system, which will help us track and manage the growth. Also, what we're able to do with our field sales team, which we've refreshed. We've got a new field sales director. We've replaced 2 reps that weren't producing in the field. We've changed the compensation plan so that they are motivated to sell more and more and more. Is with those groups that are seeing what we're doing with the registry study and the observational opportunities, as they come to us and say, well, we want to be a part of this, the conversation is, well, you need to be significantly using the test before we can actually put you into this mechanism. It's something we know will drive the numbers. And so between what we've put in place to drive growth with PSE and what we've put in place to drive CERT through the second half of this year and through 2025, I think we're going to make good inroads into driving revenue that will help us become more cost effective and break even. So having said that, let's move on in the interest of time to, we have a pipeline of assets, as you know, that's ready for partnering. The colorectal test and the canine test have had a lot of people interested. And let me refresh you on why there's so much interest in this, and why with some of these potential partners, we're on 3 or 4 meetings deep, and we're actually starting to get to the point where the rubber hits the road and we can be seeing, if not a deal, a definite letter of intent relatively quickly. So colorectal bowel cancer test, which we call Episwitch No Stool or NST, is head and shoulders better than the Cologuard test, which has almost 10% market share. We're 83% accurate in detecting the presence of polyps. We're also very good at early stage cancer detection. And let me show you on these 2 comparison tables, it's all about early detection and removing polyps. You look at our test, which is on the first column in green, the sensitivity, which is the ability to assess a disease as positive, and the positive predictive value, which is the probability that that metric is actually true, are very high and superior to the Cologuard. And this is Cologuard 2.0, which was just refreshed, or the FIT test, which actually LabCorp puts out there, and superior to the Freenome and Guardant tests, which have been published on. They're not on the market. However, they're trying to be developed. If you look also at the ability to see early stage cancer, our sensitivity and positive predictive value are very high. Cologuard claims a 90% sensitivity and ability to see the disease, but only a 2% positive predictive result. FIT obviously is much lower. Freenome and Guardant, even though they're up in the 70s and 80s, again, have a very low truth rate for their positive call. And so we have a lot of people wanting to understand how they can bring this in and partner with us. For the Episwitch SCB, which we call Scooby, this is a test which you've heard about in our previous calls. It has a balanced accuracy across the 6 of the most common cancers of 89%. It's a routine blood test. There's no special handling. It's run and can be run in our Clear facility in Maryland. So what we've done recently, and you may have seen the RNS on this, is we have soft launched the ability to run tests from what we call beta testing veterinarian clinics in both Maryland and Colorado. And the reason we've done that is because as we've talked to potential partners, we've been asked, are there doctors that are using this? And can we talk to those veterinary doctors about how they use it, what their experiences are, what they're using it for, and how much they think they can charge for it? This is actually very important. The market considerations here in the US are that 1 in 4 dogs will be diagnosed with cancer in its lifetime. There are 65 million plus households in the US own at least 1 dog. We saw a real boom called the puppy boom during the pandemic, and companion animal testing became a much bigger market for people. So this is why these animal health companies are moving into it. 95% of who we now call pet parents consider their dog family. 86% of them in a recent study said that they would pay whatever it takes. This is in the US. Boston Terriers are the most popular dog in the US. Golden Retrievers are the second most popular. You can see the types of cancers they have. We cover all of these cancers apart from mast cell. We are developing mast cell as an add-on to our test. And you can see on this slide, our test, even though it can command a price of $1,500 with the specialty veterinarian oncologist in the US, is far superior in accuracy than the other tests that are out there. It's minimally invasive. It detects 6 different types of cancer where none of the others do. They can only say yes, no. We can add others like the mast cell to it. And we don't have any of the inherent problems, which are in yellow, that the others do. And I'll highlight a couple. This cheapo test here claims 87% accuracy. There's no definitive proof for that. It's a urine test. It's an at-home urine collection. There's a special tool needed. I would say, even with a special tool, if you've never tried to take urine from a dog, male or female, you're on a loser right there, right from the beginning. And it's a test in worms. It's a chemotaxis assay with the urine. In worms, it's very unreliable. The other 2 tests, the Searchline and the FidoCure, very expensive. They're based on DNA panels. They don't tell you the results of the DNA test. They just suggest to the doctor what drug they might want to go forward and use on the animal. Now, you might say, well, John, this test is very expensive. But in the US market, the alternative, if you don't know if your animal has cancer, but it's exhibiting cancer-like symptoms, is to do a CT scan, which is $3,500 to $4,000. What you're going to find there is whether they do or they don't. If they do, you're going to find that you have a mass somewhere. You're not going to know what it is. You're not going to know what to do with it. So that's the vet test. The canine test is somewhere where we are actively talking to potential partners. And at this point, well along in those discussions. So to summarize, for PSE, we now have 30 concierge clinics ordering PSE. They're scalable. Some of them have the potential to have thousands of tests come out of them. Our VP of Diagnostics has teamed up with Dr. Arrivo to convert that concierge base to larger routine clinical use. US urology key opinion leader Garrett Pohlman is championing us nationwide in the US. We're in conversation with national distribution partner that came back to us after knowing that the 94% test is superior to what they offer and having complaints. Our UK lab is online so that the early work can be being done in the UK. For CERT, the top-down prospective observational registry for CERT is up and running. It's what was pushed by those KOLs at the regional health systems to help us grow adoption in a safe haven way for doctors, allows us to charge for the test and get all the information we need to fast track it into the market. There are 3 more coming on in Q3. There will be more beyond that. The sales team is refreshed and recharged. There's definite evidence of sales growth, which can continue. And we've been shortlisted for the UK government, by the UK government in their call for the cancer immunotherapy response solutions in their SERP grant, which is up to £9 million, pounds. And I'd like to ask Sasha, Dr. Kulichev, to give us a few more details on that, if you would.
Thank you, John. In December last year, Office of Life Sciences, this is a government body shared by Department of Health and Social Care, together with MRC, placed a call which, and I'm quoting, aims at putting UK at forefront in cancer treatment in the world, focusing on the most important question in cancer treatment, which is developing platform and biomarkers for prediction of response to treatment in immuno-oncology, checkpoint inhibitors. It also has as subtitles focus on side effects, which become a serious issue, very familiar for us. We have placed, stated our interest, letter of intent. At that point, there were 9 separate consortiums across the country. We were the only one with the reliable developed biomarker test as the backbone of the whole program. And after reviews and meetings with the office, we received the news that we've been shortlisted for the final government interview, which will take place at the end of this month, and the work starts in August this year. 9 million distributed, majority 4 million will be spent in the first year, and significant part of our job is to run commercially our tests on multiple patients within NHS. And as you can understand from our story, this test giving huge advantages in cancer treatment for American patients in UK on private healthcare, and it's only NHS patients who are deprived of it today. This work, among other objectives, will deliver very important real-world data within NHS practice, a last stage in adoption of something as a test in clinical practice. So that's the bottom line.
Thank you, Sasha. I have to say it's about time that we got a little bit of recognition for a British biotech with tech out of Oxford that we've taken to the US and we've really got it running. And what has been acknowledged here is that we have a solution that we could bring to everybody, and being homegrown like that is great. So I'm going to stop right there and ask for some questions. I know that there are quite a few, and I know that Alex has questions for the team.
Thank you, John. Thank you for that presentation and outlining the strong foundations that the company's put in place over the last 6-9 months to hopefully put the company in a good place to grow future orders of the key certain PSE tests. We are now going to take some questions. If you'd like to ask a question, please type it into the chat box at the bottom of your screen, and we'll try and cover as many as we can. So this first one, John, came in ahead of times. It's quite long, so I'm going to read it out, and here it is. So Oxford Biodynamics has opted to commercialise the EpiSwitch CERT test and the EpiSwitch PSE test on its own. Commercialising new products can be financially crippling and requires considerable funds, leading to Oxford Biodynamics' repeated fundraisers. Fundraisers are currently running at 1 per year for the last 4 years. Given the painfully slow growth of sales, would it not be sensible to license these products out or work with another company to commercialise them?
Yeah, that's a very, very good question. And let me tell you, when you look at, here we go. Well, let's go back. The pipeline that we've built. What we've built is we've built the pipeline on purpose to be attractive and to be able to collaborate and partner with some of the bigger companies, and they are in the US. This product pipeline, as I said earlier, really does look like the image of a lot of those bigger companies. The challenge here is that we would love to work with to commercialize these with a bigger company or companies. And that's indeed what I've described we've been trying to do with colorectal, bowel, canine, and the EpiSwitch cert and the PSE are not off the table. What we've had to do, because in order to get recognition that our technology is commercializable and that it is here to stay and that it can answer questions in niches that the others can't, we've had to go it alone to this point. What I think that we're starting to see is that people are waking up in the commercial world in the US and saying, wow, let's go and see what's possible here, because our technology can do what others can't. And as we've had those conversations around the colorectal bowel, let's say, we've had other people say to us, well, you've got the PSE test. It's on the market. Is that something you would partner and work with us? And the answer is absolutely. Now, what we've not tried to, but have set up here is a situation where if you come to any of the tests which are either on the market already or what we call market ready, you've got something that is de-risked. You don't have to go ahead and do anything other than integrate it and start scaling it with the expert team that's in place. Now, I got asked a question, and I thought it was a good question too, that goes on with this, which is, well, Jon, you are shoestringing this company along. You never have enough resources. What's stopping somebody coming in and just waiting for you to fail and then just picking all this up for next to nothing? And indeed, that's something that people think. Now, it's true that we haven't had massive resources. We've had about 30 million pounds since my team and I started doing this in 2020. We've done a hell of a lot on 30 million pounds, and we've teed it up. One of the reasons why people don't come in and let you fail like this is because they can't reproduce with the assets, the team and the understanding quickly enough without massive risk to themselves that would keep this going. So what we're looking at then is a situation where we've set it up. Look, we're going to keep moving with it. And as I think you've seen with PSE and CERT, they will pop. They won't pop as quickly as everybody has hoped, which is why we've never given a lot of guidance on that, because until you know that they're going to pop, you really can't say that. We see signs right now that both of the tests on the market are going to do very well in the next several quarters, and that people are waking up to the fact that there is opportunity to partner and commercialize with us. And I think that for me going forward, as I said during the raise, that's where I have to focus, is pushing that along. So it's not that we haven't wanted to do it. We haven't been in a position where we'd be taken seriously, and now we are.
Thank you, Jon. Got a question here on the fundraise. The fundraising is described as funds for our near-term activities. The non-dilutive transactions are described to fund the group's activities over the short to medium term. This implies no confidence in becoming self-funding. Why not?
Well, I don't think that that's what the implication is that I would take out of it. What it does is it shows the pathway that we by necessity have to take, because unlike some of the bigger companies that were funded to the tune of tens and hundreds of millions, we are building in a very lean and stepwise fashion that's not linear. You build the foundation out and it moves up. That I've never been in a business where if you didn't build the foundation, eventually it takes off. Now, unfortunately, you have to be quite patient for that eventuality. But like I said near the beginning of this, we still have the passion, drive, and belief, because on the ground, we see that this is going it needs more resources. It needs those partners. It needs that acknowledgement, both by the market in terms of the commercial partners that are possible in the US, and quite frankly, the UK government. What a shot in the arm. I mean, this sort of stuff really starts to help everybody else believe that, wow, what we've been saying is true. It's here to stay and it's possible.
Thank you. Got a question about the various tests out there. So there's been some heavy press coverage recently about Barcode 1 and their saliva test, which could help diagnose prostate cancer sooner. Can you comment on what you feel might differentiate the EpiSwitch PSE test from this spit test?
Right. Yes, I'd be glad to. I mean, I just think just up front, it seems, and I might be wrong, but every other month there's a new prostate test that comes up that is going to save everybody, right? And so what we do, and this is what this comparison chart is all about, is we've put this chart together so that everybody can see apples to apples what's going on. If you look at this chart, when we look at the available information for Barcode UK, we find that the accuracy is very low. It's less than 50%. And remember, 50% would be flipping a coin. The positive predictive value is 23%. That would mean that 77% of the time, you actually would be not getting it right. And the data for the NPV specificity and sensitivity is inconclusive. I believe that this is actually a test, a saliva test that's been around for quite a long time, hasn't been commercialized, but is being touted as an alternative. And it's only when we can debunk it by putting it into things like this that people really understand that a lot of what's being pushed along actually isn't very good. And I think Dr. Akulichev can give us a little bit more color on that.
Thank you, John. I certainly can add more color to that. It's a classical study focusing on genetic risks and scores. It started in, John, absolutely right, 2018. In the papers, we all saw it at the beginning of June because it was presented at ASCO on some results of the ongoing trial. Just to remind, at ASCO, no one is allowed to present anything published, so it's still more data to come, inconclusive some of the results. And the focus there is on about 130 mutations with calculated modeling of risk scores. From the slide that John showed at the very beginning, the accuracy in clinical outcome that we deliver comes from the fact that our biomarker modality captures genetic risks, epigenetic inputs, metabolic signals, all contributing to pathological phenotype. In majority of cases, genetic risks apply and manifest themselves in subgroups, subsections of patients. This is exactly the case because about over 6,100 patients roughly has been sequenced on 130 mutations. Scores were drawn on them, and top 10% of those patients were subject for further analysis, i.e. 90% of patients in this scenario, that test just puts aside without any judgment what happens to them, particularly if there is epigenetic input, just as we see from all our studies across different ethnic groups, which could be significant. And from just under 500, there was something about 470 patients scored very high. Those were put as potential prostate cancer patients. The definitive MRI biopsy analysis just on those patients, others were not analyzed even, showed that that test identified with 60% error rate who has prostate cancer. So that's where we see in such a low accuracy numbers. And on the back of it, you have to imagine that you actually spend time sequencing 6,000 patients to find yourself in a position to make further judgment only on about 500 of them, and it's still highly inaccurate. It's better than PSA, and that's the argument that was put forward. But that is not a test that, strictly speaking, could be used in the category in which PSC test has been developed and validated in prostagram, early detection of prostate cancer of population at risk across all of them.
Yeah,
This really applies to a very specific subgroup of patients. So
thank you, Sasha.
Thank you.
Next question here. How much cash does the company have?
To answer that question,
yeah,
I think we'll talk to the CFO.
Sure, I'll answer that. Well, that's today's cash balance is not something that we've included in the interim statement, so I probably shouldn't give you that. But you can see from the statement that immediately before the end of March, or at the end of March, we had 1.2 million. And then the funds that we raised, which we announced in March, but actually which was completed post-period end in April, that fundraise brought in gross funds of £9.9 million. So that will give you an idea, if you like, of where we were immediately after the end of the period that we're reporting on.
Thank you. How much could the UK Research and Innovations Cancer Immunotherapy Response Research Platform grant be worth to OBD?
I think.
Yeah, I can answer that. Again, I think, as Sasha said, the total grant award is worth up to 9 million, and half of that is intended to be distributed in the first year. Our role is primarily commercial running of our EpiSwitch cert test as part of that consortium, and there would be some funding coming in reimbursement for staff time and that sort of thing as well. Those funds, if we're successful, would be shared between OBD, the two universities who are taking part in it, and the NHS trusts who are part of our consortium.
Thank you, Paul. Next question here. Given the revenue growth is so disappointing, what have you done already, and what will you do in future to reduce the high cash burn?
I think what we're looking at here is we have built the company so that we are very, very lean, actually. And the people that we employ within the company are cross-trained. We have taken some steps, as Paul can talk about in a second, of not replacing certain positions when they come in. We're constantly looking at ways to reduce or definitely not overspend in areas. It's a difficult balance because with the cross-training, for example, everybody who works in our laboratories is also cross-trained on product development, also cross-trained on clinical testing. And so what we've done, instead of employing 2 or 3 people to do those things, is get people that can do all 3 of those things and train them up. It's a similar thing, actually, for what we're able to do in our commercial in the US. We have a commercial, 2 commercial teams, one for PSE, one for CERT, but they all work with a customer service group that can work in each of the verticals. They work with a logistics and operations group that works in all of the verticals. So we don't duplicate anything that's not there. Case in point, Dr. Abdo, who I mentioned as our VP of Diagnostics, many years experience, he's very, very good in the background of being able to exercise influence, onboard, and grow things for us. So we keep looking at what it would take to pull our revenues in and keep them, to pull our costs down and keep them in check as revenues are actually low. We expect that our revenues will get a lot better through the end of this year and into next year. As you've seen, we've put in place the ability to do that. And one of the things I think that we need to do with the market in general is, now that we're in a position to have some idea of which way the wind's blowing, albeit in a brand new marketplace which we're establishing, we need to be able to put our numbers and out probably quarterly to begin with, so that you can see how that growth is actually going, and how that is affecting our revenues and the costs associated with actually doing that business.
Thank you, John. Next question. The target for PSE tests is 1,000 a month. When are you hoping to get to that target?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because, you know, we set 1,000 a month as a target in order to be the shoot to the moon target, not based in no reality, but basically in the reality of, at $950 a test in the concierge market, which pays very quickly, where there's 10 million people we can go after, and you've seen how we started to do it. That's the way that we could get to cash even as quickly as possible, i.e. 950 to $1 million a month. Now, when we talked about that, obviously, some people would have expected that to happen immediately. That's not a very good thing to think, because, as you've seen, it takes time to build a foundation and grow out. But in reality, what you're seeing with 30 clinic groups actually and growing, and the fact that each one of those groups has clinics within it, and there are 50 to 100 patients in each group, and that we're at a 3 per day right now, I can certainly see how that can increase 5 and 10-fold relatively quickly, get ourselves into the tens a day, and start driving towards that number. What I would expect, even seeing the signs that I see right now, is that through the end of the year, we will be chasing very quickly that 1,000 will be in the hundreds a month. If we are successful in being able to bring on a distribution partner regionally and nationally, I would expect to see that accelerate and push along. So that's the good news. Can I tell you exactly when? No, but I can tell you why we set that target, and that what I see is that we're well on our way to accelerating towards it.
Thank you. Does the small size of the company prevent orders from being placed?
I don't believe it does. I think if you refer back to when we brought the laboratory on in Frederick, Maryland, we brought it on so that it would have the capacity to do tens of thousands of tests. 1,000 tests a month, which is something that we can achieve, would be 12,000 a year. We can go way beyond that. Where we would actually have a bottleneck, and this is where we're trying to get distribution, is, can people draw enough blood and send it to us? The clinics do it. The regional and national distributors that we're talking to do it. Once that gets put in place, we wouldn't have any problem doing tens of thousands of tests any quarter.
Thank you, John. We've got time for one last question, I think, maybe possibly two, and apologies if we haven't been able to cover all the questions that have been sent in today. So let's try this one, John, and we may be able to get the second one out there as well. Would a licensing deal for the NST or the Scooby test be structured to receive an upfront lump sum or royalty only?
The answer is that it would have multiple parts. We don't need to be greedy, but we do know that these tests are very valuable. What I've seen in the market and in some tacit conversations I've had with bankers and others in the US, since we're looking at doing these partnerships with US companies, is that a modest upfront can be coupled with milestones for getting the partnership and everything working and running, and a significant royalty on the back end. So I think you structure it so that there is money flowing early through an upfront, that there's money flowing as you do the work to integrate into somebody else's infrastructure, which isn't cheap, right? And there's royalties as you start to drive volume through their infrastructure that benefits both companies.
Brilliant. Thank you, John. I'm afraid we've run out of time for today's webinar. So I might ask you, John, just before people leave, if you wouldn't mind summarizing a couple of words before people exit. And when you do exit, if I could ask you to please leave some feedback for the company in the feedback survey, that would be very much appreciated. Thank you. So, John, would you like to just a couple of closing remarks?
Yeah, I would. First of all, I would say thank you for staying on and listening to what we're saying. And I just reiterate, we have put in place in the first 2 quarters the ability to expand out, even with the 30 concierge groups that we've got, a significant number of PSE tests. And I believe that's going to really push. The cert is actually on track with this registration, observational registration study, to be a lot more bulletproof than it's ever been. This is being driven by the doctors themselves. And that's what bulletproofs it. They've realized that this is needed, that it's being paid for. They just need to drive it and use it, and that their doctors have to understand the protocol for doing that. So I'm very, very happy about that. And I think we can be bullish on the fact that on the horizon, there are deals to be made, and they can be good for us and our partner and help us get through the growing pains of early commercialization and growth. So thank you for sticking with us. I hope you will, and continue to.
Great. Thank you, John. Thank you for the team for presenting, and thank you for everyone attending. And as I mentioned, as you leave today, please could you complete the feedback form. Thank you.